In the early 2000s, political scientists viewed the internet as a virtual Habermasian public sphere. The assumption was that global connectivity would automatically foster democratization. Today, the academic consensus has swung hard in the opposite direction. Researchers now tend to view cyberspace through a lens of deep pessimism, characterizing it primarily as an enclosed system for state control and trivial distraction. This modern pessimism rests heavily on two specific misconceptions. The first is the belief that digital authoritarianism, the use of technology to surveil and manipulate populations, is a toolkit used exclusively by autocratic regimes. The second misconception is behavioral. It assumes that algorithmic, short-form social media strips young voters of their agency, trapping them in passive, low-effort behaviors often labeled as clicktivism. However, recent cross-national time series data and behavioral regression models reveal a far more complex reality about how digital power operates, fracturing both of these assumptions. Accurately measuring digital politics requires looking at two opposing forces simultaneously: the top-down state architecture and the bottom-up behavior of the users navigating it. The top-down element involves examining direct state-level network interventions, localized internet shutdowns, and mass digital surveillance tactics. The bottom-up element requires analyzing how young citizens, specifically Generation Z, actively utilize and manipulate algorithmic social media feeds. This creates a central tension. Do these platforms inherently favor centralized state control, or do they serve as highly effective tools for citizen liberation? To answer this, we must strip away ideological assumptions and look exclusively at the empirical data found in state repression indices and user regression models. This taxonomy chart outlines the specific parameters of the digital authoritarian toolkit. It separates these practices into four distinct pillars: surveillance, censorship, cyber attacks, and disinformation. The first pillar, surveillance, translates traditional physical monitoring into data-driven behavioral tracking, utilizing government access to social media metrics. Censorship and cyber attacks map physical border control onto the digital space. Instead of closing geographical checkpoints, states deploy deep packet inspections, content filtering, and localized internet shutdowns. Disinformation replaces the physical marshaling of crowds with digital information channeling. Governments use automated bots, patriotic hackers, and data flooding to manufacture pro-regime narratives. Together, these four pillars constitute the perpetual agenda of authoritarian stability, specifically adapted to survive in the modern information environment. Because cyberspace operates without physical borders, these tools of coercion and manipulation are structurally agnostic. They are available to any government with the technical capacity to use them. The Digital Society Project and the Digital Repression Index provide the primary empirical frameworks used to measure how states deploy these tools. The baseline assumption in these studies is that closed regimes lean heavily on aggressive, highly visible tactics, like nationwide internet blackouts, to maintain order. But the data reveals a distinct contrast. Democratic states actually possess significantly greater technological capacities and digital infrastructure for repression than autocratic nations. The critical finding from the index is conditional. When democracies are governed by illiberal leaders, they readily discard their institutional restraint. These illiberal democratic leaders deploy the exact same toolkit, specifically focusing on social manipulation algorithms and mass surveillance as their fully autocratic counterparts. The empirical data proves that a democratic constitution does not grant a nation immunity from digital authoritarian tactics.
Regime type is no longer a reliable barrier to state control. Shifting our focus from macro-level state infrastructure down to the individual devices of Generation Z voters, we encounter a different academic bias. This bias is known as the infotainment scare, the prevailing academic fear that digital media is substituting deep, meaningful civic engagement with superficial, rapid-fire entertainment. This theory gave rise to the concept of Clicktivism. It argues that youth political participation has been reduced to low-effort, politically inert actions, like merely sharing or liking a post. Young users themselves openly admit that highly visual, algorithmic platforms like TikTok make them take politics less seriously. But we have to question whether this self-reported lack of seriousness actually correlates with a lack of real-world political action. To test the Clicktivism theory, we must look past online vanity metrics. We have to analyze the logistic regression data linking specific platform usage to traditional offline political mobilization. This data visualization compares regression models measuring political participation among 18 to 25-year-olds. It divides the measured behaviors into two columns: online participation and traditional offline participation. Looking at the online column, the results match expectations. Heavy usage across all major platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, correlates positively with increased digital engagement. The critical data emerges in the second column, which tracks traditional offline participation, actions requiring physical friction. Here, we find a stark anomaly regarding campaign volunteering. TikTok usage is the only platform variable that demonstrates a statistically significant positive correlation to offline volunteering. This platform usage translates directly into political labor, individuals showing up at physical locations to work phone banks, canvass neighborhoods, and organize rallies. A second anomaly appears in the financial data. Alongside Twitter, heavy TikTok use uniquely predicts a higher statistical likelihood of young users making direct financial donations to political causes. This creates a direct paradox. The application most heavily criticized by academics for promoting trivial infotainment is mathematically the strongest catalyst for traditional political labor. The architecture of short-form algorithmic video successfully bypasses the supposed Clicktivism trap. It proves highly efficient at converting digital attention into physical, offline political capital. Reconciling these two halves of the data provides a cohesive theory of modern digital politics. Information and communication technologies function as structural amplifiers, scaling both state control and citizen mobilization with equal efficiency. On a macro level, these structural amplifiers provide illiberal democracies the capacity to seamlessly deploy autocratic surveillance networks and disinformation campaigns without dismantling their physical institutions. On a micro level, these same structural amplifiers allow citizens to leverage gamified algorithmic feeds to organize physical, offline political action at scale. Modern digital politics exists as a continuous, unstable feedback loop between top-down state architecture and bottom-up viral mobilization. Relying on the outdated binary of internet utopia versus digital dystopia blinds us to actual political outcomes. Broad generalizations about democratic immunity or generational apathy disguised as clicktivism simply fail to hold up against the evidence. To accurately evaluate the future of global power, we have to follow the raw data, analyzing the specific digital infrastructure toolkits that states possess and measuring the precise mathematical effects of platform architectures on human behavior.